Story now. A bombshell new report shows that the Department of Defense, yes, the Pentagon, controlled the COVID-19 program from the very beginning, and everything we were told was political theater, basically to cover it up, right down to the FDA vaccine approval process. It was all theater. That means that human beings were used as props, essentially. According to newly obtained documents, the Pentagon used a combination of shady approval authorizations that are still in use, including the PrEP Act, the Emergency Use Authorization, and other transaction authority, the OTA, all of which shielded big pharma agencies, medical participants that delivered unregulated vaccines from any liability and protected them, basically. We've gone through a lot of these documents and just showed how they are not on the hook for any of this liability. These documents, these new documents, were obtained by a former executive of a pharmaceutical contract research organization. That person is Sasha Lydapova, and Sasha joins us now to tell us what she's uncovered. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Sasha.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. This is intense. I mean, when you first uncovered these documents, did your jaw just hit the floor, or did you know that this is what you were going to find based on the breadcrumbs you were already uncovering?
Well, I was really shocked. I was working on this for quite some time. My first finding was that these products were not good manufacturing practice compliant. And that I found right away when they started being rolled out due to extreme variability of adverse events and deaths that were reported per each lot of the so-called vaccine. So that was very shocking to me as a pharmaceutical professional, because we know how high quality pharmaceuticals typically must be manufactured. You know, they have to be very, very consistent. There should be practically no variation lot to lot in terms of toxicities or any other performance characteristics. And these products were varying about 1,000 times lot to lot. So that was extremely concerning. And I didn't realize why that was happening, but I just knew that they were not good manufacturing practice compliant. I later confirmed that through regulatory documents. And then the final piece of the puzzle was when I was able to see all these contracts from the DoD. They were released based on Freedom of Information requests and also Securities and Exchange Commission disclosures. And when I saw those contracts, there were around 400 that are now available for all COVID, so-called COVID countermeasures, including vaccines. I realized that was really what was going on. The Department of Defense used a very shady contracting practices and also used several laws that were put in place previous to COVID to do this, to shield pharmaceutical companies, to not conduct proper clinical trials, to do a lot of fraudulent, I would say, manipulations of public perception, and all in collusion, obviously, with mainstream media and these pharma companies. And so as a result, we have this theatrical performance called clinical trials, but they were actually not real. They did not, based on the laws that are used here and invoked in this process, the clinical trials are not required at all. And in fact, they cannot be conducted.
I mean, that's there's many really troubling parts of the story. We'll unpack a few of them, but that one stands out to me perhaps at the top of the list, is the theatrics that were put in place for these trials. So there were human beings in many ways being used as props to paint the veneer that they were somehow going through deep trials to make sure that we were all safe with these vaccines. And I know there was for instance, a 13-year-old girl. They in fact had an ad, the Vaccine Safety Council had put out an ad that was going to run during the Super Bowl. Then it was yanked by Comcast. They wouldn't allow it to air, which shows a perfectly healthy 13-year-old girl who went through this particular trial and then ended up having all sorts of adverse events. So these people were used as props, essentially, right?
Yes, exactly. And so the clinical trial subjects were deceived. But importantly, most of the clinical trial sites and investigators were also deceived, and most of the FDA employees were deceived, because this particular scam is driven from the top. Only few people, as far as I understand, at the top of these organizations, the Department of Defense, HHS, FDA, BARDA, their legal counsels, they know. But then the rest of the regular employees and rank and file, and especially clinical trial subjects, of course, were kept in the dark. And in fact, under Obama administration Cures Act, amended, I believe, the emergency use authorization, or not emergency, the informed consent requirements, such that subjects don't have to be necessarily informed of what's going on if it's deemed not in their best interest. And so again, through, it's too long to go into the legal history. There's very extensive research, hundreds of pages of documents on legal history of this, but the laws that they're invoking to run this program do not require informed consent, and also do not require the clinical trials.
So the
and they're
people,
not under FDA.
I'm sorry, this is unbelievable. So the people involved in these trials, they don't need to be informed about what is happening?
Yes, exactly. So the informed consent rules have been amended under Obama to say that if it's not in the best interest of the subject, who decides if it is or it isn't? But that's what it says. So, these types of things can be concealed from people, that this actually under emergency use authorization used during public health emergency. This is very critical. That's why they keep extending public health emergency beyond we don't have any emergency, but they keep extending it. Why? Because they need this. Under public health emergency use authorized these kinds of medications, countermeasures. That's a key word. These are not vaccines; they're countermeasures. So all these three together, they can use it this way. They don't have to inform the subjects what it is. They can use a lot of secrecy. They don't have to run clinical trials. They're not required because these products cannot be investigational products. That's what the law says. If they cannot be investigational products, then we don't have any investigation and we don't have any clinical trial subjects. So that's how they're pulling this off.
So it's at the Pentagon. It's at the Department of Defense. You talked about countermeasures. And, of course, I think what we all think of immediately is foreign threat, right? That you're dealing with the Pentagon, right? It's supposed to protect us against foreign adversaries. So how is COVID a foreign adversary? And how is this being run through the Pentagon?
That's a great question. So from the very beginning, turns out that the Trump administration and subsequently Biden administration treated this COVID as war, as an act of war, because the National Security Council is setting COVID response policy, which is National Security Council doesn't have any health department representatives, only defense and intelligence. And so National Security Council sets policy for COVID. HHS is not setting policy. HHS is not lead agency in response of it. They're managing information. So the top of the government is treating it as an act of war. And they're telling all of us, oh, it's a health event. It's a naturally evolved virus, jumped from a bat. And don't even mention, lab creation, because you'll be canceled on social media immediately and censored, right? So right from the start, we have huge deception going on. What in fact they're treating as war, they're telling people it's health event.
And we learned from the Twitter files, Sasha, just this past week, the latest round of Twitter files, that the Biden administration was actively going after and trying to censor anybody who talked about lab leak theories and talked about Wuhan lab. And we're going after this idea that this came from it came out of a lab. And so they were actively trying to censor that narrative. So this was all coordinated. And we know that multiple agencies were actively, of course, going after Twitter and social media companies and trying to keep this quiet. In these documents, does your research show, just how deeply does this go? How widespread is the Pentagon's tentacles in this? Does it reach to Dr. Fauci? Does it reach to other main agencies?
Well, yes. So they're all in fact coordinating this. In fact, there is, they even set up in 2013. So by the way, the pre-planning goes years, at least 2012, 2013, based on the contracts and based on the documents that I have uncovered. So for example, there is Pandemic Enterprise. It's a quasi-private, quasi-government enterprise that's been set up in 2013 that involves 10 heads of federal agencies. It's called PEMC, the abbreviation. And so 10 heads of federal agencies, including Department of Defense, HHS, FDA, NIH, Department of Agriculture, Energy, Veterans Affairs. So all of them get together and secretly discuss these kinds of countermeasures, very secretly. So there's their memorandum of understanding pasted on FDA's website. And most of it, 90% of it, deals with how we're going to keep everything secret between each other, all the confidentiality disclosures, how we're going to communicate about this. So we have this cabal formed with a lot of secrecy and a lot of procedures to maintain secrecy about pandemic responses in 2013.
It's almost like they knew this was coming. I mean, this is where we talk about conspiracy theories on this show. I mean, it's all true. I mean, this is unbelievable. So there it is, all in 2013. It's all laid out.
It's laid out how they're going to keep everything secret. And I wonder why what's supposed to be a health event is so secret from the public. So how is this even, so then they're treating it as war, then again telling us it's health. So here we go. So they're covering up military activity with this representation of health event and a response to a health threat. So that's where people are not informed right away and being deceived. And then, because they've invoked these set of laws and they're using countermeasures, not even vaccines. So countermeasures are not pharmaceutical products. Countermeasures it's all different category.
So to be clear, then it's not technically a vaccine, right? It's just a countermeasure.
Countermeasure, and specifically, Department of Defense ordered them from private manufacturers as prototypes. So people were never told, oh, come over, get injected with countermeasure prototype. Were they?
No, and they weren't told that, right? Because as you pointed out, they were not on a need-to-know basis, right? So they didn't have to have informed consent. So here's a prototype we're going to inject you with, just like the 13-year-old girl we featured at the beginning here and talked about. Mm-hmm. Would her family have allowed that if they knew that this was just a prototype?
Absolutely not. No, people were told, oh, this is vaccine, this is safe and effective, it's been tested rigorously. By the way, no testing of safety have been done. They have not done any animal trials. They have not completed any animal trials, not even started them before they started mass injecting people in human trials. And that's a complete violation of all regulations everywhere in the world, including FDA. And again, nobody was told that. They said, oh, it's been tested. It's been in development. We've done preclinical trials. And they've done none. They just went straight into people and injecting this girl who